Welcome to the Village of Waukesha Special Joint Plan Commission and Village Board meeting. Call it to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Plan Commission first.
White.
Here.
Buckles. German.
Here.
Stigler.
Here.
Webb.
Here.
Packers. Here.
Village Board.
Kalinsky.
Here.
German.
Here.
Stigler.
Here.
Korecki.
Here.
Buckles.
Here. Open meeting law and compliance check. The agenda was posted on the 3 village public notice boards, the village website, and distributed to all news media requesting a notification in accordance with the open meeting laws on or before 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Okay, moving on to citizen comments. Anybody have something they want to get up and say? Now's the time. Come on up. State your name and address for the clerk, please.
My name is Helen Owens. I'm at W242S6272 Elder Air Drive. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, village ordinance states that decisions regarding spending belong to the village board. The village received around $800,000 under the American Rescue Plan. At the March 22nd village staff meeting, Village Clerk Snyder said that they had decided they wouldn't be using this money for the bridge because it was going to be used for a new truck. I don't believe this was ever discussed at the board level, which violated village ordinances. Clerk Snyder refused to add Trustee Michael Gorecki's 2 agenda items for the meeting on April 14th this year. This is a direct violation of Village Ordinance 2-54 B1 and 2. The board had been advised that the clerk and president broke the law by refusing to add the trustees' agenda items. Why did 4 members of the board decide to give the clerk a 15% raise immediately after this refusal? Why is the board considering giving that same clerk, who violated the law, more power over the agenda? What corrective action has the president taken to prevent the clerk from breaking the law again? Why did 4 members of the board vote to allow only the president, who directed the clerk to break the law, to attend staff meetings? How will the rest of the board know what's going on at staff meetings since they've been excluded? And I don't think the clerk keeps any records of the proceedings. Why did we stop allowing a trustee who wants to do more for village residents from doing the extra work by attending staff meetings? I'd like the answers to these questions in written form. And in closing, I'd like to add that I support the 2 ordinance changes proposed by Trustee Gorecki.
All right, anybody else?
Hi, Gloria Curran, S31, W25109, Green Valley Drive. I'd like to refresh the board's memory. About 3 to 5 years ago, this building was overflowing with citizens because the board wanted to buy land around Big Bend Road across from Pro Health Care. It was a resounding no. Apparently, this board does not take into consideration its citizens and what they wish. You need to get out there, you need to talk to your citizens to find out what they want. I went back to review some of the recordings of the previous meetings, and somebody mentioned why citizens aren't coming. Number 1, citizens come, they voice their concerns, nothing occurs. You ignore it completely. That's not acceptable to me or anybody else. I'm not in favor of VJS, I think it is, construction services, doing any building. From my research and knowledge, they raise 33% because they're a Milwaukee-based business, that they have to have union workers. Does that 33% go throughout the whole state? Do you get a reduction if you're out of the country or county? Also, the board members who have relationships with this person or their families should recluse themselves from anything. Also, where are the other 2 bids? You have to have 3 bids. You can't just rely on one bid. I am supporting the binding referendum that's listed here, both of them. And I agree with this lady, what she just said. We put you here for our interests, not your interests.
Okay, anybody else? Come on up.
Evening, all Katie, West 238, South 5320, Chestnut Trail. It has recently come to my attention that what should be an open and transparent process for governing our village is morphing into something else. Matters that should be discussed and voted on in open meetings are instead being decided by, apparently, 1 or 2 people behind closed doors. Items involving large expenditures, such as how to use an $800,000 grant from the American Rescue Plan, should be decided by the entire board in open meeting available to the public. Apparently, agenda items that have been requested by one individual trustee are not being included on the agenda of the village board. This in violation of the village's own ordinance and binding under state law. In my opinion, any trustee should be allowed to have input into the agenda. If there's something he or she feels is important, then it should be included. I understand an ordinance change has been introduced to give sole discretion over the agenda of this board to the village clerk, an unelected person. I can't imagine anything more inappropriate. I'd like to remind the board that all of the members of this board, all, were elected by we, the people. Any attempt to ignore the concerns raised by a board member is to ignore we, the people. In the past, as was mentioned earlier, this has proved unwise. Thank you.
Anybody else? Come on up.
Laura Gurecki, S39W22244 Tim Drive. I'm a certified public accountant that worked as an auditor for many years. It was my job to not only evaluate financial statements, but the trustworthiness of the management teams that put those financial statements together. I'm very aware of the policies and procedures needed for reliable oversight. You 5 gentlemen are the management team of the Village of Waukesha. You represent the voters, and it's your responsibility to handle that authority with utmost care. You are accountable to the citizens of the Village of Waukesha. We expect transparency and accountability from our leadership. Recent actions have raised questions about your willingness to be transparent and accountable. You have the opportunity to provide both in measures coming to a vote soon. First, the bids for purchases greater than $25,000 just makes common sense. What one of us wouldn't seek bids for work being done to our homes or look at more than one vehicle before purchasing? Honestly, I'm shocked that a measure like this isn't already in place. It should be. Getting multiple bids to ensure the amount being spent is appropriate shows you're being good stewards of the money entrusted to you. Second, a referendum for purchases greater than $1 million reflects an understanding that the money under your control comes from the citizens of the Village of Waukesha. An expenditure greater than 1/3 of our budget should have the approval of more than just the board. For our village, that's a huge amount, and it should be given the care and concern required of such a sizable purchase. If the purchase is realistic and necessary, there should be no issue explaining it to the voters. I strongly urge you to pass both measures. Please remember, gentlemen, that the money under your oversight is not your own. Please treat it responsibly in such a way that you can adequately justify every expenditure. Over the past several years, voters have shown that they are willing and able to take actions to change the leadership in place if that leadership is not listening to the concerns of the voters. The question is, are you listening?
Anybody else?
A few other comments I have. I believe term limits need to be put in place for all members of the board, plan commission, or anything. It should be an 8-term limit, then you go off for 4. This idea of being on the board for a lifetime, no. Absolutely not. Because you get stagnant, you get weary, you don't listen to the people. And some of you guys have been here for ages.
Sandy Hamm, West 230, South 3827, Milky Way Road. I can't take issue with everything that's been said, but I don't know anybody up there who's been up there for more than 4 terms, and not all of you have been elected as far as I know, so I don't think that's true. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff going around. I think you know how I feel about the referendum stuff and the bids. I mentioned that at a previous meeting. But my comments tonight were sort of coming at it differently. I don't think many of us out here on this side appreciate the degradation in tone that we've been experiencing, and I would like to see it minimized. I've also seen over quite a few administrations a lot of campaigning in this room during meetings, and I see it starting to take place again. It's only July, April's a way off. Do your campaigning outside this room, please. As far as the spending of money goes, I don't have the same concerns that other people do. And by the way, it seems like an awful lot of laws have been broken lately. It's just amazing. And I don't take bids for everything because sometimes I know the person and I want it, but I guess some people do. But anyway, I think that as far as the spending goes, the elephant in the room is what we spend on the fire department. And I don't know what the appropriate amount is. I know there's going to be a referenda in, I think it's Western Lakes or wherever next week, that they want to spend more money, and it'll be interesting to see how that comes out. I've seen 5 administrations struggle with putting up a new fire building, sleeping quarters, and nothing's been done. I think there's a number of reasons for that. One is the amount of money. But it would be nice if there would be a resolution to it. And I don't think a referendum is a bad idea to find out whether people back it or not. I've mentioned this in previous meetings. I've mentioned it privately. I think it's a fine idea. I don't know that we have to have a rule, although the attorney mentions that there might be a reason to have a rule in case someone comes in and makes us have a rule for $50,000 or something. But there's clearly a division in the community over the spending of this money for the fire department. And I think we should get an answer. I think we should find out and stop. I mean, like I say, 5 years. And by the way, 5 administrations. 5 administrations, and we've had, that means different chairmen for all of those. And that goes back 10 years, 12 years. So nobody up there has been up there for a long time. Twice, once. You know, it's not like that. We don't, it just had, if you came to the meetings, you'd know who was sitting on the board. So anyway, and I also see that as the community grows and becomes more citified, we get people that want more city-type things, like they're concerned that the roads aren't good enough. I drive every road in this village, and as far as I'm concerned, they're satisfactory. Are they all perfect? No. In fact, they all get a rating from our engineer, and we fix the ones that we can afford to fix. But I don't know anybody here, behind me or in front of me, that wants to raise their own taxes to get better roads. So you're caught in this dilemma where people are complaining and whining about they don't get this and they don't get that, I don't get a firehouse, they don't get roads, I don't get the snow plowing the way I want it, but they don't want their taxes to go up. It's silly. And I think, another possibility for a referendum, just like they have for the schools and stuff, if people want this, find out if they want it. And ask them, maybe in a binding way, should we raise our taxes beyond the state mandated limit to buy the things that you people are asking for? And if the people vote no, you got your answer. And if they vote yes, you raise the taxes to satisfy what they want. I remember, goes back 6 administrations to Stillwell, room filled up again, but it was mostly Milky Way people and the people south. They wanted to come in and totally tear up Milky Way and redo it, and we all came out, and Stillwell was just amazed that, everybody was not in support. Don't come out and mess with our road. And they didn't, and we still have our road. So anyway, thank you for your time. I probably went over 3 minutes.
Okay, anybody else?
Mike Orecki, S39, W22244, Tim Drive. Just a couple
Again,
of
I have
thoughts.
to, at least for the record, so you don't say if something kind of happens that I didn't warn you that it's considered inappropriate for trustees to speak under public comment.
Thank you. A couple of thoughts that I think address some of the things that other residents brought up tonight. There's a concept regarding the law. It's 2 Latin words that are used, rex and lex. Rex is the king, lex is the law. And in England, the king was law. The saying was rex lex, the king is law. What the king decreed, that's what happened. And we saw what happened because our founding fathers hopped on a boat and came over here and risked their lives and everything to start a new free country where all would be equal under the law. The other thing, we just took the pledge, all of us, we all took, those who are elected also took an oath of office to uphold the laws of this community. And when that doesn't happen, that's when you get the kind of disruption and contention and negative tone. We enjoy First Amendment privileges, okay? Freedom of speech. And what's special about America is it's the minority opinion that needs protection. Nobody has to work hard to protect the popular opinion. But when there's a minority opinion, when somebody wants to say something, even if it's unpleasant, what that does is it creates discussion. The idea can be aired out on its merit, discussed freely, without fear. And if it's a dud, it's dismissed and we move on. When the process is run fairly, there's relative peace, okay? It's when people get stepped on, that's when we've got problems. Just wanted to bring these things to mind. I think we often take them for granted, and we've seen how that played out nationally. All kinds of riots that the country went through, and frankly, I'm not too optimistic about what we see moving forward. What I'd like to see is a village of Waukesha to be a beacon to other communities where, again, the rule of law is upheld, where communication is open, where people can put something, even if it's unpopular, before the board. We have an ordinance on the agenda tonight that does just the opposite. It's an awful suggestion. Other residents have already made that point, and I'll leave it alone. But just a couple of things that I think we ought to bear in mind. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll move on. Discussion and possible action and appointment and confirmation of Chad Niles to replace Kathy Piala for the remainder of the 3-year term to expire 4/30/2024 for the Plan Commission. Chad, you want to come on up? You would like to give us a little background?
Certainly. My name is Chad Niles. I've been a resident for 15 years. My wife and 2 kids live on Valley View Drive in the village just off of 59 at W266S3588 Valley View Drive. Full-time law enforcement patrol lieutenant is my career, and I'm excited to join the board.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Chad?
What department you work for?
The Sheriff's Department?
Our Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
Have you ever had public office before, Chad?
No.
I know you keep a busy schedule with the Sheriff's Department. You feel you'd have the hours to dedicate to the board, to the Planning Commission?
Yes, based on talking with President Stigler about the requirements of this position, I have more than enough time for that, yes.
Perfect.
Okay. I would like to move to approve Chad Niles for Plan Commission member.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. What's the next step? We have to swear him in.
That's up to the report the clerk wants
Just fill that out, Chad. That's it. You got a pen?
Yep.
I'm sure you do, yeah. Okay, moving on to number 7, discussion and possible action on a site plan of operation amendment request for petitioner John Rodell doing business as the Rodell Group LLC for the property located at West 270 South 3425 Merrill Hills Road, tax key WAKT 1365998, to renovate the existing main building's Cochere entrance overhang, remodel the main entry doors with full ADA accessibility, and add an 8-foot by 12-foot golf starter hut in front of the west end of the main building. Okay, Sean, you want to start this?
Yeah, thank you. You may recall back last year, September, Legend Merrill Hills was in front of us requesting site plan of operation amendments to expand the dining area to the north and on the back of the building. They're back doing improvements again. And as you mentioned, they're looking to expand the porte cochere, the entrance, remodel the main doors, ADA accessibility, and then add the 8-foot by 12-foot golf starter hut in front of the building. They're also doing some painting and some refreshing of the main building, as well as paving some of the parking lot. Those items don't require site plan commission review, board approval, because they're so minor in nature. But certainly the addition of the new entrance structure and the golf starter hut do require plan commission and board approval through the site plan of operation process. The caveat here is that here's the existing entrance that's being torn out and replaced by a new one. The footprint basically remains the same. It doesn't extend as far to the south with this round overhang, but the footings remain the same, the general size remains the same, and so the site plan is not really changing with respect to the entrance overhang. The doors that are being replaced, as you can see here, this is the existing building itself. These are the entrance doors. Currently, the side, you enter through the main building on the sides of the main entrance. They're switching that around so that here's what the rendering looks like, and the petitioner may want to speak to this when I'm done, but I just want to give you a broad overview. You can see this is the new entrance overhang. It's missing that circular portion at the front, but as you can see that the paving pattern remains the same, and the new doors are directly out front and are ADA accessible. The caveat here is with regard to the starter hut. The location of the starter hut, here's the plan. So here's the main country club building, here's the west end out front. The starter hut is here, it's already been constructed, it's been constructed without permits, without approval from the planning commission board, so they are here today asking for approval. If it's approved, they do have to go and get building permits still from the building inspector after the fact, so they are willing to do that as part of the process. They've supplied, here's what the starter hut looks like today. It's a very simple open-air structure. It's approximately 8 foot by 10 foot. There's a wall at the back and then a counter, asphalt shingles. The siding here is basically horizontal siding. So very simple open-air structure. The actual pictures that were supplied, you can see here. Here's the main building, large roof overhang. Here's the starter hut. Our code requires that accessory buildings be at least 10 feet from principal buildings and all other accessory buildings as well, and that includes the roof overhangs. And the building itself is over 10 feet away from the main building, but the roof overhang of the main building and the starter hut is only 5 feet away. We do have a provision in our code that does allow a 5 foot separation, no less than 5 feet, but it requires proper fire rating as determined by the village building inspector. We have asked the village building inspector to weigh in on this. He's on vacation now. He has not gotten back to us since. I believe one of the planning commissioners may have something to say about this and what it would mean to be properly fire rated. That's all I really have. In terms of architecture, obviously we require 50% of the buildings to be finished materials. The planning commission should determine if that starter hut meets those requirements. My final comment is with regard to stormwater management. The starter hut basically replaced a small portion, I think it's about 250 square feet, where this used to be all pervious surface. They carved out a little bit here, 250 square foot, put the concrete in there, put the building on. So essentially there's less open space and more paved area. I don't know what the stormwater management plan says for the site, but I'd be requesting for them to provide something from Waukesha County that says this is no impact, or to provide us with the stormwater permits if it has to be changed. So we would be issuing a building permit for it, and if they don't provide that, and they don't provide proper fire rating as determined by the village building inspector, this building will be found to be not in compliance and have to be moved or torn down. So that's all I have on it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, is the petitioner here? Want to come up to the microphone, and if you got any comments or questions or for the planner?
Really just, Sean did a very nice job of recapping. Actually, on the portico share, we are going to leave it at exactly the same footprint. All we're going to do is resurface the soffit, put some new LED lighting, new metals on it, but the footprint will basically be the same. The ADA doors, it's just really, I went from a side load to a main entry, and so that was something to help with our customers. The starter hut, yes, I'm not going to make any excuses why it was built, other than we had a carpentry crew available, and it was trying to get it done in the summer versus next season. And so I reached out to the building inspector, and as Sean mentioned, I've not received a response yet, but we will work within the provisions of the code for whatever fireproofing we need to provide.
Okay, anybody from the Plan Commission now, any questions?
I have no issue with their overhang redesign or anything, but this building has, the little starter hut has some concerns. I was out there this afternoon. The building as built is 7 feet 9 inches from the face of the building, and that's to the wall of the building, 7 feet 9 inches.
Just to reiterate, you're saying this wall here is 7 feet 9 from this wall here?
Correct.
No, it's not. It's 10 foot 8. I measured it personally, sir. I have a picture in my phone.
This is the picture that you submitted as part of the application showing that, but I haven't verified that.
My tape measure must have odd numbers on it then. The roof is only 4 foot 6 inches separation. It's not even 5 feet. I take that back. It was 7.2 to the overhang, or 7.2 to the overhang. It was 9.3 to the building.
Oh, so this overhang to this building is
Yes.
9.3, and this is 9.3, that's 7.2.
Correct. And it's 4.6 to the roof.
And the roof is 4 foot 6 inches separation, which is not even allowed by the code. We say 5 feet with proper fire rating.
Right. So that, I don't know if it can be fire rated or not.
So what would that mean? I don't have any experience. It's an open air structure. Does that mean the roof itself would have to be fireproofed in some way? What would that entail if it was fireproofed?
I've never seen a fireproof roof. I can't even answer that for you. I've never had that situation. I don't know.
The code, again, depending on what the building inspector comes back at, but the state code talks about a potential WILE rating, which would be, we can provide that. On the roof structure, we probably have to do the back wall. The reason the back wall is solid is the door that you see on with the rail there, that's the ladies' locker room, and we're trying to give them some privacy. That was the reason that wall was solid.
So you'd have to take the shingles off the roof and take the siding off the wall and provide some amount of fire rating that way?
Kind of like on a commercial building, you would put a roof, drywall on the roof before you put the roofing on it to get the fire rating. Similar.
I see. But the issue stands, if it is in fact only 4 foot 6 inches from roof to roof, it doesn't meet our code in terms of required minimum 5 no matter what the fire rating is. I don't know if that can be rectified by truncating the roof in some way, and slicing off 6 inches of the roof.
That'd be up to them.
Right, that would be one way to alleviate it, if it could be fireproofed, and then you could still meet the 5 foot separation distance.
Yeah, they would have to, somehow meet the code. If they have to cut off part of the roof and move it back and fireproof it, I guess, and then and I'm sure the starter building could stay, but as of now, I don't see any way around that, and we're gonna violate the code here, and it's not our intention.
Would a steel roof suffice? Nah, okay. And how is it bolted to the ground?
It's a thickened slab, concrete to keep it from heaving. It's a monolithic board, and then the framing is just quick bolted to the concrete.
Is it possible just to move it out to meet the code?
The problem is that moving it, the reason it's there, again, I'm not making excuses, it would be in a traffic lane, and that's why we tried to keep it. We thought we had it, and you move it out much further, and you can see from the aerial photos, we'd be in a traffic lane, which really don't want to do that. You can see where the parking is right now. So that's why we kind of set it back in there more so the, I don't know, Sean, if you have the photos with the attendants out there. Yeah, they're there. So you can see that, you put a golf cart there and an attendant, somebody picking up that golf bag. It does take up some room. So again, that's our problem to deal with. We'd like to comply with what we need to do. I guess
Is it possible?
that's not why it's out 20 feet. It's we'd be right in the middle of the traffic lane.
Well, I don't know, how much room do you need to move it out?
You need to get a full 5 foot separation between the roofs, whatever that would take.
And we're at what now?
4 foot 6.
So we need 6 inches, right? So 6 inches is gonna...
No, 4 foot. If you want the roof 10 feet away.
No, the roof, as long as you fireproof it, the roof can be 5 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
So what would it take to move that? How many inches, what are we talking?
Well, it's hard to say because of the way the roof is configured. If you look at the roof, yeah, it's sloped. So here's, right, as you start to move it away, you're not, for every 6 inches you move it, this way, you're not gonna be 6 inches from that because of the slope of the roof, right? You may have to get it a foot or two away to make it.
So a foot or two moved towards the driveway or whatever will make it compliant?
Or chop the overhang roof off of here and truncate it, and basically, put a soffit on the end of it.
You're talking on the starter building.
I'm saying the starter, if you chop it back to say where the wall is, you're close to the wall, and put a soffit, and then a gutter, that might do it,
That would get it where it belongs.
potentially, I don't know.
I don't know either, I guess I kind of not mixed up, but it's a little bit different here as far as the roof overhang plus the distance to the building.
The problem is the main building structure has a curvature to it, so depending on where you took your measurement, where I took mine, maybe
It's gotta be the closest point.
Right, the closest point.
well,
So the corner would be probably pretty close, right? Close to it.
I estimated that either with the northwest corner of the starter shed would be the closest point to the.
Yeah, you're right, probably from here to, wherever that would be. So in my numbers in the report, I stated that it's 5 feet away, but that's based on information that was provided.
That's why I sent Dan out to measure it in eyeball, because they weren't sure what the pictures actually showed, so.
again, I was standing on top of that concrete wall with a tape measure, so I'm not.
Mr. President, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
One, all these measurements, I don't have any. It's all hearsay from three different parties. That's one fact I just want to make clear there. And the other question again, is there any amenities like electricity, plumbing, nothing's in that building? It's just a hut?
It's just a hut. There's a photo, basically, they just, it's really right now what the attendants were doing is they were putting up one of those little portable pop-up shelters. And number one, they were dangerous, and so we wanted to give them something a little bit nicer, a little bit more professional looking. And so, yeah, I mean, you can see they've got a little bucket for, somebody needs a wet towel, and there's scorecards and pencils, and that's really it. Nothing in the winter. It's basically keep them out of the sun and the rain.
And one more comment, I guess, I have is, obviously I'm not a building inspector to see what fire rating could do, or what we could do to amend this situation that we're in here. I'd like to see that in writing or whatever, to see what they could do if so we wouldn't have to move it, but if they can't come up with a resolution, I believe that the only thing we could do is, would be move it, unless, like I said, they can come up with some kind of a fire rating system for us. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments from the Plan Commission?
John, could I just make a comment, John?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm a member up there, so I'm not gonna be voting on this, but did you take a look at moving it to the other side of that first cart path? That way the cart people would be able to at least even see the first key box if they have to. So it'd be to the west of that, like,
Where?
to the west side of the first cart path where it goes down along the building there.
No, we're over here.
I'm sorry, I know where I'm going.
So, excuse me, I'm just being rude here, but you're talking about right here, or down here?
Yeah, you know where they are currently.
Yeah.
Just to the west of there, on the other side of that cart path going down the hill.
Right here, right? In this area right here?
Yeah, but on the other side of that.
Right
Come-
here?
come right there.
We have to take down all those trees.
Those trees are gone, aren't they?
I think a few of the big ones went out of there in the center, but no, those are still there. So again, we were trying to not cut down trees. Here, we tried to make it convenient for the guests, so when they come in, that they can, get their clubs. And this was a really, you know how congested this area was.
Right,
So
right. That's what I'm saying.
we're trying to eliminate that, because this is the major road then that goes to the number 1 tee box, and then you're going to number 10 over here. So again, I'm not here to make any excuses. We tried to pick the best one. Shame on us for not complying. We want to make it right, and we thought that was the best location. I've been out there, where this is just a horrible mess. And you can see that this is where cars come here. So you start pushing that out here, all of a sudden you're really in the traffic lanes. So that's what we did. We thought we had our dimension correct. I those are the dimensions I pulled, but again, I'm not here to debate that. We'll try to see what we can do to make it right.
Well, that's the big question. What can we do to make it right?
Well, I think the building inspector has to get back to me on what he would like. The ordinance is very open-ended. It really doesn't say, it says to comply, but it doesn't say it's a 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever rating. It doesn't get into that
Right,
detail.
it says properly fire rated. So
Yeah, properly, so I'm not sure what that means. Someone asked about a metal roof. Actually, wood is a better material. I've used drywall. That's, again, sounds pretty simple, but that does provide a fire rating. And if that's what it is, if we have to cut back the soffit, the back.
So one way to do it would be just to add the condition in there. We've already talked about proper fire rating, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Condition for Waukesha County for stormwater. We could say that the roof, no matter what, the roofs have to be at least, all portions of the buildings have to be at least 5 feet from each other, whatever that takes, right?
Right.
Whether that's cutting the roof, whether that's moving the building, or whatever it is. That would be one way to do it. If they can't do it, then it has to be removed.
One way to do that might be to switch out from a hip roof to a shed roof, sloping towards the building. You could probably pick up a foot or two that way.
Yeah, there's a couple strategies, again, that we can definitely take a look at to pick up that real estate. And again, unfortunately, you can see the curvature of that roof, and nothing's geometric there, and that was part of the problem.
Dan, do I have any other question? Comment?
No. I'll make a motion that we approve their overhang and their starter hut with the conditions that the planner put in place. And also that the starter hut complies with all fire and building codes based on what the building inspector tells them has to be put in place. If that can't be accomplished, the building will have to be moved.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? I'll second.
Okay. The only legal question we have is if it has to be moved, none of us on staff have the power to approve the new location, so that would mean it would have to come back, which is fine. I just want to make that part of the record. We can't just...
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess that was understandable to me.
Okay, if that's what you intended, I just didn't want you to think that they got to decide again where to move it.
No,
They'd
we
have to come back.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Who seconded that motion?
I did.
Okay. Right. Okay, it's moved, there's a motion on the floor, all from the plan commission. All those from the plan commission signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Move on to the village board.
I'd make a motion to accept the recommendation of the planning commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded to accept the recommendation of the plan commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Abstain.
I want to abstain. Let's do it. Okay. I guess the adjournment of the plan commission is in order.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second. Moved and second for the plan commission to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're adjourned. Village board. Reports. Clerk treasurer.
Presented in the packet.
Okay.
Pick up your mic.
DPW, I believe that's in the packet from Jerry couldn't be here tonight. Fire department, Andy's not here, but I believe that's a packet report also. Sheriff, do you have anything to say? No? Okay. Weed commissioner? Mike, nothing?
Nothing to add unless somebody has a question right now.
Okay. Seeing none? Approve minutes.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from June 23rd as submitted.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to accept the minutes of the June 23rd meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
One abstention. DPW building presentation by Kevin King from VJS Construction Services. Kevin, you want to come up? Sure.
Excuse me. So I wanted to just touch base on a few different things. Do you mind if I sit? You want the challenge button?
No, you can sit if you like.
As long as
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Is that microphone on, Kevin? Is the light on?
It is on.
Okay.
So in the items that I handed out tonight, there was 3 different documents, and I'll kind of go through what they are to start with, and then I'll touch base on kind of the processes and such that was taken for that. First off, there was a set of plans that is a document that's very preliminary in nature that we put together based upon review of the site, discussion with the DPW, and taking a look at what your existing conditions were. I presented that at the last time that I did attend the board meeting, and nothing has changed for the most part. There are a couple little tweaks as we reviewed code implications. Additionally into that, there are 2 different documents. There's what we call a project balance sheet, which is really a document that is a summary of construction costs. There are other costs that go into the construction of a project that would have to be reviewed and added to this as appropriate. We can assist in that, but we were only asked to take a look at the construction costs at this point. The second item that we have is a estimate detail report, which breaks down the different components of the building. So just so you know what the documents are. Wanted to touch base first in relation to process to date. I want to reiterate, because we discussed a lot in detail at the last meeting, but everything that we provided to date, and including what I'm providing tonight, is that no cost to the village and no obligation to the village. We looked at the site, reviewed the site, provided some recommendation based on our construction experience, viewed the location, type of building, how the site will flow, so on and so forth. We did look at building recommendations, looked at types of structure, what met within the planning commission ordinances, the village ordinances, to make sure that what we're presenting was appropriate. We did provide several different concepts, reviewed those with the DPW as to how that would work with their operations. We created some preliminary documentation, which we have tonight, and then also we have the budget creation, which we've provided tonight. There was discussion in the past of, why are you doing this? I mean, it's really, we're about building relationships. We are a Waukesha County construction company. We are started in Waukesha, town of Waukesha, in fact, on the north side of Waukesha. We are in Pewaukee right now because we operate the facility we are in. We've been there for about 15 years. We are stewards of the community. Most of us live in Waukesha County and are in the area. We like to build relationships because it develops opportunities. Even if we go no further here, I've met the entire board, I've met people within the community. It's good for us as a company, and we are stewards of the community, both as a company and as personally. I grew up in the town of Vernon area and have been very connected to Waukesha my entire life. So when this all came about, I had talked to President Stigler, know him as identified at the last meeting. We know the Adjournment family. There's people in the community, the King family's been around for a long time. We just know people and have went through that. So it's really about relationships and kind of where we stand. So what I wanted to talk a little bit more then about is an additional item that I want to make sure is completely transparent going forward, is that I also am related to Chris Snyder. She is my sister-in-law, which that has no bearing on my professional liability. I would provide the same recommendations regardless of that situation. And at this point, there is no obligation anyway. So I just want to make sure that that was completely clear. I was under the impression it had been shared. I wanted to put it on the table so everybody's aware.
Also, this is just educational for us. If the residents actually can understand that, there's no bidding going on here, there's no money being spent on anything. This is educational.
Absolutely.
to try to help us with stuff.
So, to date, no obligation, no price, no cost to date, and no cost going forward if that's the decision. So what I want to do with that said, so everybody's aware, we have the budgets that I put together. It is based on a metal building structure that is concrete in nature for the foundation, concrete in nature for all the slab construction. There is a concrete foundation wall that extends above grade that is a barrier wall around the perimeter of the facility to allow for that there is not any damage as trucks enter and leave and so forth. Above and beyond that, we did verify what the requirements of the planning commission were and the zoning codes. So the structure is a metal building structure and would have a metal skin on 3 sides of the facility. The front side, per requirements of the code, would be completely brick. It's required that there be at least 50% of the front elevation as brick. In order to accomplish that, because of the number of doors, there are 5 doors on that elevation, it would have to be completely brick, which would match very closely to what you have for existing, because the building does connect to the existing maintenance building. So with that said, there's several different parts of the budget and the estimate detail. Just want to kind of explain what those are, so as you review this later from an educational purpose, from an educational standpoint, there is a general conditions section. That is the cost for a contractor to manage the process, supervision of the site, project management, dumpsters, portable toilet facilities, all of those type items. Demolition, which is connection to the existing facility. Concrete, as I noted, the concrete part of that is the foundation and the barrier walls around the perimeter. Masonry is the masonry veneer for the front elevation. Miscellaneous metals, because of the way that the building has to be constructed up against the existing, there's an elevation change. So there would have to be an access point, the way that we looked at it, from an access point from the existing maintenance building into the new. Because of the elevation change, there would have to be a stair at that location. So that includes the metal stair. Carpentry is just that, blocking for facilities. There also is in this plan, and it's on the conservative side of things because we're reviewing against the code and we're not, based on the size of the facility and depending on the building's classified, we may have to have a bathroom within that building. We've included the cost for that. I can break that out as appropriate if necessary, but that cost has included, so that's where the carpentry cost comes in for building that bathroom. The joint sealants is just that, an allowance. The doors, frames, and hardware go along with the building. Access doors, overhead coiling doors, glass glazing. We did include some clear story windows to provide natural light on the back side of the building, which would be the transom windows. Drywall would be for the bathroom, hard tile for the bathroom. The painting and wall covering is just for the bathroom and the miscellaneous iron. And then the major part of the cost is really the pre-engineered metal building. So what we looked at is, we've discussed this with the DPW, what works. We looked at possibly a pole building facility, which would be a wood structure. That offered some challenges in order to meet the code compliance, that because you were having vehicle storage within the building. The code requires certain things because there is combustibles, because it is a vehicle storage building. So we went through that. We looked at the plumbing part of it. We did include trench drains to catch any water that would be coming off the facility, because we do have it heated so that the trucks that are parked in there would melt off. So we have trench drains to collect that and tying that into the existing site plumbing system. HVAC, which would be the heating and the vehicle exhaust requirements per the code. And then last, electrical, which would be lighting and just miscellaneous power. On that sheet. And then on the earthwork side of things, really preparing the site, digging the foundations, backfilling foundations, and then site utilities to tie in those items. With that said, we have a total budget. Looked at that. To make it appropriate, we have included some architectural costs, which would be necessary. However you move forward, we want to make sure that was included. So you have that as part of it. Construction cost, insurances, and we have included a contingency. With that, the total cost for a building of 50 by 105 5 doors, 4 trucks, heated, and having plumbing in it to accept the drainage of the trucks, and provided a bathroom at this point, is at just over $1.2 million, almost $1,250,000. That is educational purposes for you guys planning to go forward, but that is the cost for that particular facility. There are always options that can be done differently. We can reduce size, we can reduce amenities within the building, we can get rid of the toilet room. So there's always options that can be looked at, but for the facility that I explained, that's what we're looking at. So proposal going forward, as I said, no obligation on what I've provided to you. You have these documents. If we could be your partner as far as a construction management agreement, where we would do just that, is be your representative for monitoring construction. We would do no construction work ourselves. We would handle in that process, we turn over these documents to you as the village. A designer professional would have to be hired to finish the documents and get those to a bidding capability, because these are not biddable documents, these are just budget documents. In a CM agency agreement, which is what we would propose, we would be strictly that, management and a representative of the village. In that scenario, we would review the design and its completion. We would create all bid packages, collect the bids. They would be competitive bids. It was brought up a little bit earlier. We are a bargaining firm, so a union firm, but under the CM agency scenario, that has no compliance, because all of the bids would be collected and the contracts would be held by the village. We would only monitor those. So there would be actually it could be union or non-union, no issue that way. We would compile the bids, recommend awards, create owner-held subcontractors or prime contracts, depending on how we want to look at that, manage the construction practice, and manage the closeout process. So that is something we could discuss further if it is in interest of the village, but that is based upon their decision. So I was asked to bring the proposal back and of the facility that I presented at the last meeting, and that's what I'm presenting tonight. Questions?
So the bathroom wasn't for sure yet? I mean,
we need to review that and see. I would say we're probably 75% we can get rid of it. Okay. But I thought for purposes of budget right now, it was appropriate to put it in so that you are erring towards the conservative side.
Okay. I was just curious because we did talk about it when we looked at the building, existing one had the bathroom in, thought it was good enough, but yeah, this is just your estimate. I mean, these aren't concrete numbers, right, Kevin?
No, what we did do is we did reach out to subcontractors that we have relationships with in many areas, especially the large areas. So we did talk to contractors for all of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. They're contractors from the area that we have relationships with, but again, no obligation. It's just people that we know and will help us because of our reputation. We did reach out to a metal building contractor because it's the largest part of the package, and we are a concrete contractor, so we put together the concrete numbers. So we did get, overhead doors we talked to people about, and the masonry. So all of those were done as a pro bono to us because of our relationship with these contractors.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions from the board at this point?
Kevin, if you had a guess, how many hours have you put in to this proposal and the dental building proposal?
I would say between these two, well over 120, between myself, our architect, and people that we've reached out to.
And if you had to shoot from the hip as far as the hourly rate that might bid out, what I'm trying to pin down is the value of this gift that's been extended to the village.
Probably $15,000 to $20,000.
And I hope you personally don't take this the wrong way. The reason I'm bringing this up, in the village code of ethics, we need to be especially careful not to accept gifts from anybody that could color our decision-making process, tilt our bias. A $15,000 gift, frankly, in my industry, I can't accept something for, I believe the limit's $15 without disclosing that. I have to maintain enough separation to be able to say that I'm working as a fiduciary. I know your industry is different. And again, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I'm actually pointing this back at the board and the village because I don't believe we should have accepted so much work and everything frankly, on the come. That's the way it comes across. I'm very disappointed that the relationship between you and the clerk is being disclosed now. You came before this board a couple of months ago, 6 weeks, something like that. We were talking about the dental building. That dental building was purchased for $350,000, and you told us that it would cost $800,000, round numbers, in order to make that serviceable for the clerk. The clerk presented very strong objections, and frankly, as a board, we heard them. We listened. I'm just going to take issue with the fact that this information is coming up now. To me, it comes across very badly. And I would like to make a motion to table any further progress on this project until 3 bids have been received for the construction management of this project.
Is it, you making that motion, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it, but also, Mike, then I'm at fault too, because my old company, Sweep All, we donated the street sweeping to the village of Waukesha 1 year. I believe it was in the sum of about $6,000. A community, people help each other in community, neighbors help each other. And when it's tax dollars, people do care where their tax dollars are spent, and for a company to come in and give us an educational packet like this, I mean, come on, Mike.
Well, I would just remind the trustee that there's an old saying about not taking candy from strangers. To Kevin's point, he's no stranger to several of you. The code of ethics in the village ordinance is very clear that we as elected officials are not to accept any sort of gift like this that might color our bias. We just received a $15,000 gift without a relationship being disclosed. So I'll stop there. There's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded.
Any other discussion on the motion?
We need clarification on the motion.
Yeah. Okay.
I move to table all further progress on the DPW shed on these plans until we, as a village board, receive 3 bids from construction management firms, period.
Do you want to second that, Dave?
Wait, he's clarifying it,
Oh,
but I have questions.
Okay.
He was done, that's the same motion he made before.
All right.
The problem with the motion, as I see it legally, is there's been no decision to proceed with the project. There's the next step in the project is to hire an architect. Many buildings are built without ever having a construction management fee, a firm. So you can approve this motion and get 3 specs, but I don't know who's going to put the specs together to tell the construction management company what they're going to do, because there's no project for them to bid on.
Well, I'm taking it as Mr. Grecki is saying, let's move forward with this project.
No.
No. So I'll retract.
Not this project, but to move forward with the building of a building.
Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification of the motion in all due respect. You have to understand the next step in the process. Well, first you have to decide that you're going to proceed with the project. The last motion, as I understood it, was to ask for him to come, you decided which layout of the building you thought you might want to proceed with. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's how I understood, and let me just make sure I'm saying that correctly. And that's what he did. He came back with the layout you picked of the numerous options for him to bring more detail in. There has been no decision to build this building, to the best of my knowledge. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's sure. But, so if you haven't decided if you're going to build a building, why would you get a construction manager because a construction manager isn't what the next step is. The next step is an architect to design the building, and then you get somebody, your engineer or somebody, to put the bid specs out, and then you put the bid specs out, and you get a general contractor. Now, I just want you to understand that's the normal process. Does everybody agree? And now, sir, I don't know that they want to take input from you, but I'll defer to the president.
So I'd like to
There's a
rescind.
motion on the table, so I know you want to talk, but that's up to the president.
So then I'd like to rescind my motion.
Can I
since-
finish the thought?
Yes, you may.
I
I'm
want to
sorry, I
finish
thought
the
you were
outline.
finished. Yeah.
No, so, and that's fine. I just want to make sure we know what we're doing. Because the architect, I believe, and again, if the representative wants to correct me, I'll stand corrected. The normal process is first you vote that you think you want to proceed with the project. Okay, but you don't have to. You can decide you want to get three proposals. They're not bids, because if you're going to do bids, you have to put bid specs together, and I don't know who would write a bid spec for an architect. But you would reach out for proposals. You could send them this and say, we'd like a proposal on you to design this. After it's designed and stamped, I believe, by the architect.
That's what I want to clarify.
That's what I think that's what Kevin was trying to answer that question.
That is the correct description if we were not going CM agency. CM agency is different. There's just to explain, there's essentially 3 different ways that we can contract projects. Actually 4. There's a design build process that is not allowed by municipalities. There's a general contracting process, which is when there would be an architect engaged to draw plans, draw up specs. There'd be bidders that would put together numbers based upon the plans and specs, and then it is essentially considered as design bid build. That's the second type. There is a construction manager at risk. The construction manager at risk is very similar to general contractor, with the exception of the contractors brought in, they develop the bid packages, and in a construction manager at risk scenario, the construction manager holds the contracts of the multiple contractors.
And that can't be done either.
That can't be done either, and that's what I was gonna say. Construction management agency is a completely different scenario. This is where, a scenario where the village does not have somebody in their auspice that is qualified for managing construction. And the construction manager agency is really hired as a representative of the village to manage that process. In the time that we've done agency, we have actually been hired as a construction manager prior to the architect. And we've been part of the process of hiring the architect. This has been done in Washington County twice. We've done it with other counties and municipalities. In that scenario, we would be hired as a construction manager, and we would help you manage that entire process, draft the proposal for the designer, whether it be us or whoever. I mean, I'm not bringing, this is just explaining the situation. So I just want to clarify, that's construction management agency, and we would not hire, in that makes sense, we would not hire the contractors. We would review the bids, make sure they're complete, the complete scopes. We would make a recommendation to the village, and then we could draft the contracts, but the contracts to the contractors would be a direct relationship between the village and the contractor. Let's use the mason as an example. So the mason would actually be working directly for the village. The contractor would say that we're managing them, but we're not holding the contract with them. So that's the big major difference between construction manager risk and agency.
That's fine, then I guess I'm not gonna comment on that. I have comments, but I'm not gonna comment. The motion can stand, but somebody's gonna have to put a document together that you're gonna send out to the construction management companies to ask for them to submit proposals for the agency. And it can't be that. So just so you know, if you go this route, somebody's gotta put that together.
Well, I take it as a trustee wants 3 bids for the project, correct?
But that's for construction management, assumedly agency, and as the representative has indicated, that's one way that you could go.
Right.
It's not the only way you could go.
Why wouldn't we get 3 bids for this?
This isn't about the bids. This is about
I know
which
what this-
methodology are you going to, first, are you going to build a building? Are you going to move to the next step of the building? And at this point, are you going to decide which of the methodologies for building the building you're going to use?
I'm going
So,
off his record. or
I've rescinded my prior motion. I move to table this decision, all progress on this project, until the board meeting on August 25th, 2022.
You're gonna table the entire thing here tonight, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Is there a second to that?
I guess what are we tabling? This is educational. There is
I haven't
no,
done anything.
there's nothing on the agenda for any of this.
Great.
Is there a, where does it say on here possible action?
There hasn't been any motion to direct Mr. King to proceed at board level, except for the last board meeting that he attended, where we asked for some plans. This is part of the problem.
I believe you supported it also with getting more information educated on this.
I supported the last decision to have Mr. King back before his relationship with the clerk was disclosed. I also asked for an agenda item to clarify some of this way before Mr. King appeared before this board, and the clerk, his sister-in-law, refused to put that on the agenda.
But nowhere on the agenda says discussion and possible action on this item.
Great, so then there shouldn't be any problem if there's a motion directing the board not to take any further action on this project until August 25th. There shouldn't be any issue with that.
That's the point of the trustee, is it's not on the agenda for action, so you can't take action. You can't make the motion, is his point.
I understand.
I think he's right. When it only says discussion, and it doesn't say discussion and possible action, it's only a presentation. So our legal ruling would have to be you can't make a motion.
I understand. I accept that decision, so I'll retract the motion. The reason I'm making it, though, is because I've tried to shine light on this before at staff meeting, through agenda items, and that's all been squelched. So it's noted on the record, so I don't want to beat it into the ground anymore. But I have to say, the way that this has been presented and the information that's been held back by this board and by our clerk, and to give I'll stop there.
Why, can I ask why you think that the disclosure was untimely?
I think it would be helpful if, I think your answer is in the Code of Ethics in our village ordinance. I think that answers it, and I'll stop there.
Could you specifically explain how the Code of Ethics pertains to this particular situation?
No.
No.
I think you should be familiar with that as an attorney and a trustee who's served longer than I have.
I was curious if you were, but that's okay.
Did you know any of the speakers that got up to speak at citizens' comments? Are you friends with any of them?
I don't feel that the question is even relevant.
I knew you were going to say that.
I think your question would have been answered if you would have paid attention to the introductions that some of the speakers made. So.
Could you answer the question? I'd be interested in that as well.
No, I'll refuse to answer.
Isn't that a bit hypocritical?
Mr. President, I'd ask you to step in to maintain order. The citizen who made citizens' comments objected to the tone being taken by the board, and here we see personal attacks. So, Mr. President, I'll call it to your attention to call the board to order.
We are in order. I think the question was answered by not answering, so
very good.
Let's move on. Discussion, I guess, Kevin, we're gonna have to take this information and
I'm just
in the future.
I'm very happy to help the board. And as I said, it was no obligation. I do not view it as a gift. I view it as something that's an obligation to me as being a community member. This did not change anything that I have for the view of anybody else before. I do not view it as a clarification. I'll leave it at that.
Well, at this point, I want to thank you for doing all this.
Thank you.
Okay?
I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, can we?
I have one question, President. Mr. President.
Tom, 5 minutes, just to let him ask his question.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Stu.
Mr. Granke said that this was a gift to us. Is a donation a gift, or is a gift a gift? Because I know many people that have made donations to the Village of Waukesha, Town of Waukesha, Fire Department, all over, and it's more than $5,000.
I think if you look at the relationship between the giver and the services that are proposed to be provided, I think the question answers itself. And again, I'd ask you to consider our code of ethics that we've all sworn to uphold, which is contained in our village ordinance.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't understand if there's a difference between a gift and a donation.
A gift is usually, as I understand it, geared to a specific individual for personal gain. That's what Mr. Jarecki was referring to when he said that a gift of $15 or more in his line of work has to be submitted. In this case, Mr. Jarecki also talked about a fiduciary relationship we have with the town, with the Village of Waukesha. In this case, nobody on this board is personally gaining from this presentation. In fact, this, if it benefits anything, it's going to benefit the village at large. And as a fiduciary of the Village of Waukesha, it would be our responsibility to accept anything that benefits the Village of Waukesha, whether now or at some time in the future. Mr. Jarecki has previously explained to us that education is always good. And I think in this case, this is just informational. And for that reason, I think that this was wholly appropriate. The timing was okay. It is not a gift, but rather a presentation to the Village of Waukesha, a proposal that the presenter himself stands to benefit from if it's accepted now or any time in the future. So I don't think that the term gift is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. You ready to come back?
He's here.
You're hiding behind John, you're going to see us.
I'm still locking away.
Yeah, cut that off.
Okay. Let's get back to business here. Discussion and possible action, operator's license for Journey Menden. Chris, do you have anything on that? Background check or anything?
Yep, there was, background check was done, no records were found.
All right, thank you. I will move to approve Journey Menden for, is there operator's license?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve Journey Menden. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carries. Proposed ordinance language concerning discretion of village staff in placing items on upcoming village board agendas. Tom, I think this was yours.
Yeah, the current ordinance has been somewhat controversial. There's been some indication that some of the activity surrounding that has actually violated this ordinance. I would take issue with that. I don't believe it has, and I'll tell you why. The current text, and I'll read it. Any person, firm, or corporation that desires to present any matter to the town board for its review and consideration shall make a written request, therefore, to the town clerk treasurer no later than 4 p.m. 7 days immediately preceding the date of the special or regular town board meeting. Such written request shall specify in detail the action requested by the town board and shall be accompanied by such other documents as may be required by Chapter 42 in connection with such matter. The village, or the town clerk treasurer shall prepare an agenda of all matters to be considered by the town board and submit copies of such agenda to each member of the town board no later than Tuesday immediately preceding the date of the town board meeting. No matter will be considered by the town board that is not on the agenda prepared by the town clerk treasurer. This current text is actually silent on the process by which something is selected for the agenda. It indicates that a firm or corporation, how a person, firm or corporation presents something to the clerk treasurer, but it does not indicate that there is any guarantee that it will actually be placed on the agenda. It is actually silent about that process. So because of the vagueness of this, I know that there was some controversy about certain proposed agenda items not getting on the agenda. The fact that they were not put on the agenda is not specifically in violation of this particular text. So in order to clarify that, in order to bring this ordinance up to current practice and common practice, I propose the following text. Any person, firm, or corporation that desires to present any matter to the village board for its review and consideration shall make a written request, therefore, to the village clerk treasurer no later than 4 p.m., 7 days immediately preceding the date of the special or regular village board meeting that the presenter intends to address the matter. Originally, I had text that stated addressing the matter at any subsequent special or regular village board meeting remains in compliance with these timing constraints. What I was trying to do there is to take pressure off the presenter, that if the village president elected to place a agenda item not on this coming agenda but on a upcoming agenda, that it would not require the original person, firm, or corporation to represent it to the clerk treasurer. So once it's presented, the decision would be made as to which agenda it would be placed on. Written requests shall specify in detail the action requested by the village board and shall be accompanied by such other documents as may be required by Chapter 42 in the connection with such matters. The village clerk may present any matter to the village president for approval and or assignment to any subsequent agenda. In such an instant, the decision of the village president will be dispositive. This is simply indicating, there was some indication or some claim that this was giving the clerk treasurer carte blanche authority over the agenda. In fact, it does not. What it does is it allows her to bring items to the president for his discretionary approval. So it's been brought up that some of the items that were proposed for the agenda didn't make it on the agenda, and therefore they were in violation of the previous text. I think that those agenda items by themselves speak to the need of this type of discretion. Some of them were simply maintenance issues. Some of them were already getting bids on them. Some of them were already accomplished. And therefore, what this does is it allows the president to take a look at that, weed out those items that do not require board attention, and then and remove them from the agenda, or not place them on the agenda. The village clerk treasurer shall then prepare the agenda of all matters to be considered by the village board and submit copies of such agenda to each village member of the village board no later than Tuesday immediately preceding the date of the village board meeting addressing the matter. No matter will be considered by the village board that is not on the agenda prepared by the village clerk treasurer. Okay. Questions from everybody?
I have several.
Go ahead.
The first is, what problem is the proposed ordinance change going to solve?
The problem came up when, because of the vagueness of the original text, we had an absolute spectacle that took place in one of our meetings where the clerk was accused of violating the law. I believe that today there were public comments that would indicate that some people out there actually believe that the clerk was in violation of the law. That's not the case. The law is very vague as it originally stood. It was absolutely silent on how items actually make it on the agenda. And this clarifies that in order to probably, it gives the president more discretion on how to weed out items that are either already taken care of or already in the process of being addressed by departments of the village that really don't need to be brought before the board. So it serves as sort of a filter for those items, and it hopefully alleviates any additional controversy regarding what's legal and what's not.
Controversy is quiet in a fascist society as well. There's not much there.
What was that? I'm sorry, say again?
Another question. Well, you can watch the video later. Since trustees were just prohibited from attending staff meeting, more latitude to freely add items to the agenda must be maintained, mustn't it?
Well, I believe that the staff meetings have been wholly and purposefully mischaracterized by certain individuals. These are staff meetings that discuss items with about staff activities. There are no board decisions being made in these staff meetings. We've been told this over and over again. We've also been told that even if someone comes up with an idea that is worthy of the board, that it must be brought before the board in order for this to actually take effect. So I know that somebody had made an allegation that the clerk was actually making decisions on how to spend money. This is actually not true. There was a comment brought up, perhaps the verbiage was wrong, but people are so quick to jump on this. There is clearly some type of an agenda going on that is in opposition to the clerk and in opposition to any type of staff meeting that has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on with the board. So I would say that your question can't really be answered because of the absolute gross mischaracterization that you've applied to not only this particular ordinance, but also the nature of the staff meetings.
If you weren't to the staff meeting, though, you're really not qualified to comment on what was said and intended. Fair?
Well, what's fair is there's nobody's qualified to comment on what was at the staff meeting because there's nothing, decisions at the staff meeting that should be brought here to the board unless they are in a form of ordinance. Or I just don't get this. I guess I will never ever deter anybody from bringing a motion that's really something that the board should be dealing with. I have not denied you that at all. The things that you're talking about were on the agenda.
They were not.
Yes, they were.
That's a false statement.
No, it is not.
The two agenda items were you're incorrect.
No, you're incorrect.
It was the ARPA spending update. That's what I asked for, to clarify the clerk's comment that she made. No. And the other was clarification regarding the fire and DPW building. The reason that I put those items on the agenda were because of a comment that the clerk made at staff meeting. Okay?
Exactly.
So in those
comments that the staff makes, and that's not for board. They come to the board when there's something there.
And the president admitted that it was in his direction that they were withheld. So it's not a lie. You have a misunderstanding the facts, Trustee Kalinsky. The other thing that I would call the trustees' attention to is Village Ordinance 2-114 C14, which says regarding the town administrator, okay, which frankly, a clerk has been performing the duties of.
No, that is wrong. She is not an administrator. There is
Well,
no administrator
but-
in this village.
I understand.
No,
but
you
she's
don't.
been-
You just
but-
stated that.
So the clerk has functioned as a de facto administrator in an administrator's
That
absence.
is your opinion. That is
You're
not a
right.
true fact.
So let's go back to what the ordinance says. In coordination with the chairperson, this is referencing the town administrator, the town shall cause to be prepared the agenda for all meetings of the town board, together with such supporting material as may be required, with nothing herein being so construed as to give the administrator authority to limit or in any way prevent matters from being considered by the town board. So this section seems to kind of fly in the face. I know Trustee Kalinsky, you mentioned that the president, with your proposed ordinance, has a final say. I guess I still don't see the harm in allowing items to be presented before the board, before the citizens. And frankly, if they don't stand on their merits, I made a motion earlier that didn't stand on its merits and I withdrew it. It was a bad motion. But let's give them the chance to be aired out and discussed instead of consolidating power in one person to decide who can be heard and who can't.
I have not turned down anybody that brings me an agenda item if they want it on the agenda. There's another way to do this. If you think that you were not allowed to have something on the agenda, you can come to the board meeting and ask that that agenda item be put on the next agenda.
I'm here, I submitted the agenda items legally and timely, and in writing, I can prove by your own email, President, that you directed the clerk not to put my items on the agenda. And they were not the agenda items mentioned by Trustee Kalinsky.
What are they?
I mentioned them previously. The ARPA spending update, that was withheld from the meeting that I requested it at. And the other was an update on the fire department DPW building. Those two items were requested timely. Clerk Snyder withheld them, and when I pressed, you stepped in to mention that she withheld them at your direction. And that is in an email that's verifiable.
Do you remember me talking to you about the building and stuff, saying that I have somebody coming in that will be addressing that at the next meeting? And you said, fine. So that's why it wasn't on the agenda.
I don't recall that.
Well, I'm sure you don't.
So perhaps we should stick to the facts.
Well, let's
The fact
try
that
it.
you recall,
So another question, Trustee Kalinsky. What qualifies the clerk to make a determination as to what items are submitted to the president? If she stands in the gap, or the clerk stands in the gap, she apparently has to make a determination as to what to submit. What qualifies a clerk, given the example I just presented, where she made a determination against village ordinance to do so?
what qualification does she need? If she's got a question about what all this does is that it allows the clerk, if she has a question about a particular agenda item, is to bring it to the president for clarification. That's all it does.
The language that you propose says the village clerk may present any matter.
Right.
It does not say shall.
Why would so would you propose that she bring every single agenda item to the president after you've complained about consolidation of power in a single individual?
My proposition is to leave the text as is, to leave it alone.
You and I, we have all discussed this ad nauseum. This text is vague and it does not address the matter at hand, and it lends itself to the controversies that we had.
So I didn't hear an answer to the question in there about the clerk's qualifications to make the determination.
The clerk is a professional individual that can, on her own discretion, decide what she needs clarification on with the president.
So your proposed text doesn't say anything about clarification. It gives the clerk the power to decide which items shall and which shall not be presented to the president.
Correct.
That's one additional problem I see with the proposed text, and that flies in the face of 2:114, which says, nothing herein shall be construed as to give the administrator authority to to limit or in any way prevent matters from being considered by the town board.
Again, we
Your
don't have
proposed
an
text would fly
administrator.
right in the face
No.
of what's listed here.
It's a moot point. We do not have an administrator.
Well, if you look at the ordinance, the administrator is not the one preparing the agenda. The clerk is, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, our
makes it even less
clerk has functioned as a de facto administrator in an administrator's absence.
I would say that's not true. Administrator is
Well,
a
that's your
formal
opinion.
position that either exists or doesn't exist. It's tangible, it's verifiable.
So
We do not have one.
I still haven't heard an answer to the clerk's qualification, so I guess we can move on.
The
if
clerk's
you're-
qualification is being the clerk.
So what specific criteria then will be used to help the clerk make that determination?
I imagine that would depend on the item at hand and what she deems to be an issue that requires the attention of the president.
So again, the clerk's discussion, or the clerk's sole discretion, there are no criteria.
Right, what I don't understand, these are professional people, you're trying to eliminate all discretion from every single person on this board. I don't know what you're doing. At some point in time, you have
That's
to
a false
trust people.
statement.
No, I don't think so. That's your opinion. At some point in time, you have to trust people to do their jobs. You have to trust people to make decisions that they were hired to do.
And in the past, my accusation for this specific instance has not been followed through. So before we talk about trusting people, maybe we should talk about sticking to what has already happened and cleaning up that mess. The board has not taken any action. In fact, the board gave the clerk a raise.
Well, did you want to discuss the raise?
I haven't heard an answer to the specific criteria, so I guess we can move on.
Well, you brought up the raise. You don't want to talk about the raise?
How will
No.
residents and trustees be protected from a clerk or president who possibly denies an agenda item for personal reasons? We just saw an instance where the clerk denied an agenda item about a fire department update when we just discovered tonight that it's her brother-in-law who
There was no fire
made the
department
presentation.
update. What fire
That was my
department update?
requested agenda item, one of them, that the clerk denied at your direction,
I
President.
had somebody coming in to discuss all that. There was no reason to have an agenda item on that. And you said, fine. This was at the lunch you and I had.
I'm sorry, you had a question, trustee?
What update were you looking for?
I was looking for more information about the plans that apparently President Stigler and the clerk and Kevin King had been working on behind the scenes that we hadn't heard anything on.
Clerk had nothing to do with
So,
that.
and that-
Kevin and I did that by ourselves.
And this came up because of a slip of the lip that the clerk made at staff meeting.
Oh, brother.
No, didn't we?
Let's move on. It's time to decide on
Mr.
this.
President, I have many more questions.
No,
And this
we're
has not
done.
been
All you're doing is
discussed.
arguing back and forth. You're not getting anywhere.
So
We're
the
not making any
proposed
progress here at
the
all.
proposed
So this will
ordinance-
go on all night. You're going to argue about it.
The proposed ordinance flies in the face of the village ordinance that I mentioned, which eliminates the possibility of giving authority to limit or in any way prevent matters from being considered by the town board. You can't consolidate that power in one person. It violates ethical principles and the whole concept of open government.
Okay,
So what
let's-
you're saying is, if we want to bring something to the agenda, we should bring it to the village board and have it voted on by 5 different people.
No, my suggestion is to leave the ordinance intact. The village attorney made an excellent suggestion that frankly, if somebody makes a request for an agenda item that doesn't deserve further attention, a motion can be made simply to table it. That was the village attorney's suggestion when this issue was brought up before. There's nothing, and that would be simple and clean. There wouldn't be any objection to somebody who, maybe it's a crank, okay, who brings up agenda items that, for whatever reason, the board thinks are petty, don't deserve the light of day. We would have the option as a board to simply table that, okay? So that's a clean solution that wouldn't require any ordinance change. And it would not consolidate the power behind one person, whether that's the clerk or the president or a trustee or the weed commissioner.
Mr. Macy, question, if we table something, say the fence and by the dumpster, can any action even be done on that matter then, until it gets brought off the table?
Well, it depends on how formally you follow parliamentary procedure. That's the technical answer. There are different types of motions to table. You can table to a time and date certain. You can table, a motion to table under the general sense, as I understand it, is that you're trying to kill it. Okay, that's what most people consider a true motion to table. And your comment that it needs to be removed from the table. But that's all well and good to say the parliamentary procedure, and those are sort of the nuances. But all you've got to do is change the proposal slightly, and it's a new proposal, and it's not the proposal that's been tabled. Do you understand what I mean? So there's a way to get around a motion to table when, so I don't think, yes, I'm sure I did say that if you don't want to deal with a matter, you can table it. That's true. But you're asking a much more specific question. And
Because why does that sound more shady to me to do it that way then?
Well, that's just parliamentary procedure. I mean, if you study parliamentary procedure, and I'm not even sure, we say in the vernacular, it's a motion to table, but sometimes you look it up and you say that's not really the wording.
Lay on the table.
So, but we're a little far afield here.
Yes, we are.
There's a current text and there's a proposed text. And your options are to make a motion to adopt the proposed text, not to do nothing, or to make a motion to do a different proposed text.
I move to keep the current text.
There's a motion to keep the current text. Is there a second to that? I'm going to ask it again. Is there a second? Hearing none, it dies.
So the question now is whether we believe that the trustees' language is better, or needs more refinement, or needs to be further studied. It's being brought back here for the first time because he presented it, but you all decided you wanted everybody here to look at this before you vote on it. And ensure the trustee doesn't take, umbrage if people say, well, I want to study it some more, or I think I can tweak it a little bit more and make it better. I'm not suggesting that. If you think it accomplishes resolution of the purported ambiguity, then you could vote on it. If you don't, if you think it should, that the trustee and I should work on it more, we'd be happy to do that.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
I would ask the board to consider that there's no perfect law. There are always nuances, always shades. There's no way to write a perfect, it's impossible. That's why the attorney's here. I think one big issue that hasn't been touched on yet is if a residence item is excluded, what remedy or appeals process exists? I believe that the proposed text creates more problems. It's fraught with problems than it even comes close to solving. That's the issue.
We understand that there's no perfect law, but also, like I said before, none of us have any personal gain of being here. The four of us could get up, or five of us could get up and walk out of here and not even have a board.
I'm not sure I understand your point.
I'm just saying, if the five of us walked out of here now, or I should say, the four of us, you'd be the only one left. None of us would be losing anything here.
So, again, I'm not sure I understand your point, but
we're here for the village of Waukesha.
I agree completely.
And all the residents.
I agree 100%. 100%. So, along that line, it's a great segue. How are we, as trustees, able to represent our constituents, our bosses, our employers, okay, if we don't have the ability to fully and freely bring all items before this board? How can we do that? The proposed ordinance change would severely restrict that. Instead of approaching any trustee.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question because you've asked it twice, and there's
Sure,
a
thank
legal
you.
answer to the question. The legal answer as guidance from, I believe it's the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and probably the Towns Association is, and it may even, don't hold me to this, be in the Attorney General Compliance Guide for Open Meetings Law. I can look it up very quickly if you want me to. But the answer to the question is, if one of yourselves, the members of the body, have asked or want a matter to be on the agenda, I know you're going to tell me this sounds ridiculous. At some point on the agenda,
Can you turn your
before...
microphone on? Thank you.
You really need my microphone?
Yeah.
Now you can hear me. All right, so at some point before you adjourn, they get the floor and they say, I would like to place on the next agenda the following item. This has been, I've taught this all over the state of Wisconsin, so trust me, this is the procedure. And you say, well, it's not on the agenda, how can we do that? And everyone in the legal field believes that there will not be a court because you cannot discuss the item. You just say, I want the following agenda item placed on the next agenda. Second, there's no discussion. It's up or down. If it's voted, it has to go on the next agenda. I'm just telling you, that's the procedure, that's the legal answer to your question, when. Because I can tell you, you can write this any way you want. I have had situations where a trustee has placed the same agenda item on every agenda pursuant to his right, and every agenda it got voted down for months. This actually happened in a community, to the point that the town chairman called me and said, do I have to put this on anymore? And I said, I don't think you have to put it on anymore. I think the board's made their decision. So you can write anything you want. There's going to be some practicalities, and I'm giving you 2 examples.
This is what I was trying to say earlier. I said, if you don't like it, you can come up at a board meeting and say, I want this item on the agenda at the next meeting. And that's exactly what you just said, correct? Yes, thank you.
The problem with going that route instead of using the existing text is that it still requires a board vote. The current system allows anybody, the current text says anybody can ask for an item to be placed on the agenda, and the clerk must do it as long as it's submitted in a timely manner. So, again, I'll just reiterate, I believe that the proposed change creates far more problems and complexities than just leaving the ordinance as is. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion to table this item, to lay the item on the table.
Okay, we have a motion to lay this item on the table. Is there a second? Not seeing a second, it dies. Moving back to the original proposed ordinance from...
All right, well, there's a misreading of the ordinance, or let's say there's 2 readings of the ordinance, and that's causing part of the concern. One of the trustees is reading the sentence, the town clerk treasurer shall prepare an agenda of all matters to be considered by the town board and submit copies of such agenda to the members no later than. You have it in front of you. And one of them says that is interpreted to mean everything people submitted up above. And one of the trustees is saying, it doesn't say that. Under this draft, the current draft, she shall prepare an agenda of all matters to be considered. It doesn't say all matters that were submitted timely pursuant to the procedure above. In all honesty, so there is an ambiguity. I'm not going to rule which is the way it's going to be. I'm summarizing what I hear. Trustee Kalinsky saying it doesn't say that, Trustee Gurecki, and Trustee Goreski saying, yes, it says that she has to put all those things on there. There's an ambiguity.
What shades my understanding is the second ordinance I cited, which states very clearly, with nothing herein being so construed as to give the administrative authority to limit or in any way prevent matters from being considered by the town board.
Okay,
so
and
I
there's an
believe that shines some
ambiguity
light
there
there.
because we don't have an administrator. So you're referring to an ordinance that you want to superimpose onto the clerk that isn't part of her duties. So if you can't read in a different ordinance that has somebody else's duties on it into this ordinance, you're reading it in, I understand, but that you're reinforcing the point that was made early on that there's ambiguity with this ordinance. I've had many communities struggle with this issue. And so I think I have some familiarity with it. Vernon has a totally, much more detailed procedure. You could argue, and I would argue, that any person, firm, or corporation was not meant to be the elected officials. I can tell you unequivocally that in most codes, that would never be interpreted as the elected officials. Elected officials shouldn't be bound by 7 days and no later than 4 p.m. and, so there's an ambiguity in that section in and of itself.
Care to keep going with that thought?
But that's why I can't support the current text. I'm not gonna say whether I support the proposed text or not, but I'm going to make the point that there are 3 or 4 ambiguities. This is really unfair of the poor drafter who wasn't me, who was, was told probably to draft this and draft it this way. But to keep the current text doesn't solve the problem. That's the only point I'm trying to make. Do I think there could be better ways to do it? Sure, but Trustee Kalinsky put together what he thought was a way to deal with it, and I think you should vote up or down on whether you think it solves the problem. If it fails, then, somebody else can decide to fix it. We can give you Vernon's, we can give you other communities that are trying to struggle with it. But, I would talk about what are the rights of the elected officials versus any person, firm, or corporation. I think that's all. You should have different rights than, in all due respect, the citizen. And I'm sorry, I don't believe that, and you can all beat me up, if the citizens ask for things that are totally outside of your jurisdiction. We want you to pass the legal right to medical marijuana, and I want to place it on your agenda. You have no jurisdiction in that regard.
Right.
I can't support an ordinance that allows carte blanche people to put anything they want on the agenda when it's not within your jurisdiction. So I would want some kind of safeguards in this kind of document that would keep you from having to have 50 or 100 or 200 agenda items that have nothing to do with your jurisdiction, just so you can say, table, lay on the table, lay on the table, lay on the table. I don't think that's good government. I'm just being honest with you. That's not the way government's supposed to run, is it? Would you all agree that?
I wholeheartedly agree.
Deadlock. Pardon?
We'd have deadlock.
So you gotta have some safeguards in here as well.
I raised those. I asked for specific criteria, the clerk's specific experience, but instead of answers, I got more questions. That's part of the harm that I see this proposed text creating. I very strongly believe it creates far more problems than it solves.
Well, just listening to Attorney Macy, I believe it's gonna solve more than we have. I'm not saying it's gonna cover everything, but I think Tom's ordinance is gonna fix a lot of the problems with the existing one. That's my opinion. Just listening to what he said tonight, I'm totally convinced that we can fix a lot of problems here. Like John just mentioned, an example, like if you had somebody wanted to legalize marijuana, as an example, but there's other things like that, that come up on an agenda. They're not appropriate for the agenda. That's what Tom is saying. We should be able to, as a president, to decide if that's appropriate for the agenda or not. If it's appropriate and it's something that this village needs to deal with, wholeheartedly I want it on the agenda, and I will put it on the agenda. Not a problem.
Well, the problem is that's not what happened recently.
Well, I disagree.
Without belaboring
We're gonna
that.
disagree on that all night.
Trustee Kalinsky, based on this discussion, would you like the opportunity to work with me to further revise the ordinance, or would you like to proceed with the ordinance as drafted? This is your agenda item. I think we've had great discussion and I think that's a fair question. Do you mind me asking that question?
I do not. I'm gonna make a motion that we adopt the proposed text minus the blue text in its entirety.
Which words are the blue text? I have a black and white.
Addressing, it should be crossed out, addressing of the matter at any subsequent special or regular village board meeting remains subject to the same time constraints applicable by law in compliance with these time constraints. That particular sentence encompasses my original text, as well as a proposed correction by the village attorney. Upon further review, I think that it's probably unnecessary because it was actually designed simply to prevent, it was to prevent the requiring of the person, firm, or corporation to have to resubmit it if it was assigned to a subsequent agenda. Based on the discussions that we have today, I think that that is probably not the best idea, so I would remove that text and adopt the rest of it in its entirety.
That's a form of a motion, Tom?
My
Is
motion,
it
my motion
I think it
is.
started out that way, but.
I'm sorry, I answered a question in the interim.
Yeah, I know, I guess that's kind of wondering if that's.
I am proposing that we adopt the proposed text in its entirety minus the blue,
What you just read, is that what you're saying?
minus the sentence I just read. Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? I'll second it just for sake of voting.
Mr. President, I have to state my objection, given the proof that I cited that you directed the clerk to withhold my agenda items, and I have that proof in writing in an email from you.
Duly noted. All those in favor of the ordinance the way Tom has presented it, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1. Moving on to C. Discussion and possible action of all spending of $1 million or more to referendum. Mike, this was yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, just as a little background, I have received emails from residents. We've heard citizens' comments supporting such a referendum. We have listened to Sandy Hamm and citizens' comments suggest using an advisory referendum. My objection there, and frankly the objection that other citizens have raised, is an advisory referendum doesn't have any teeth. What I would suggest is adopting the language used by the city of Delafield, which accomplishes my goal of sending all proposed spending of $1 million or more to a binding referendum.
Okay, anybody else have any discussion on this?
Yeah, I had, the village council had talked about some issues with not having such a ordinance. Could you go over that issue again?
Certainly. There was a case, and it was all in my memo, and I think we inadvertently didn't put my memo in this month's packet, we put it in last month's packet, so I could pull it up, and maybe I should have instead of paraphrasing. Chris, whether you can find it faster than me, or was in the last month's packet? Should I be looking at last month's packet? Mr. Director, this is your agenda, can you help us in this regard?
I believe this was at the June meeting. I have it in front of me.
So, there was a court case, a landmark case, the Mount Horror case, that came down that said that citizens can do direct legislation on matters that the municipality has not acted on. That's the basic premise. And so, many municipalities, and it dealt, I think, with this issue. Many municipalities, I just got a text, you still can't hear out there?
I got a text from somebody saying we can't hear. I told Sandy, and he said somebody up there must have turned it off.
Well, I just said the audio's not working.
Oh.
I have it up on this phone, and there's no audio coming.
Yeah, it shows it's running through there. I'm not sure why it's not working through the YouTube.
I'm recording. So there'll be a record.
So when this court case came down, now, I don't know what we can do about that problem. When this court case down, most governmental bodies, many governmental bodies, decided that they thought they should set the limits and the guidance and not have just a citizen come in, as that was mentioned, maybe at $50,000 or something. So many communities, if you go and look through the code books, will find that they have this ordinance because they've decided what they think is the appropriate regulation for their community. Fair enough? I mean, that's really the policy decision is first, should you have an ordinance? I don't know that anybody here is saying we shouldn't have an ordinance. And the second one is, what should the ordinance say? And it's been recommended by the presenter that it should be the Delafield ordinance should be the guideline. At this point, I just want everybody to say there's no ordinance on the table. The discussion tonight is to direct me to prepare an ordinance based on, in this case, the recommendation is Delafield, and that's fine. If someone makes a motion that the village attorney is directed to prepare an ordinance based on blank, that's what I'll do, and it'll be on the next agenda or the agenda after that for full discussion at that time. Fair enough? Just to lay out the procedure.
Yep.
We're not adopting an ordinance tonight. If we're talking about transparency and we're talking about full disclosure, I have to recommend that we probably direct me to draft it so everybody can read it, and then they can decide if they want to vote on it.
Quick question, how would we have known that a building like this would have costed $1 million unless we didn't do the first thing we did tonight?
You would have to do what you were doing, and then once you knew that there was the potentiality, and you would also be bound if you went out to bid, and the bids came in, and you had estimated 900,000, and it came in over $1 million, then you'd have to go to referendum if $1 million is your cap. I'm just saying, if $1 million is the cap, you do what you did,
right.
You know it's over $1 million, so you would go to referendum. If you went to bid thinking it wasn't under $1 million, and it came in over $1 million, you would have to go to referendum before you could sign it, again, if $1 million is the cap. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to steal your copy.
I included, the clerk included in the packet something that I provided from the village of Elm Grove when they went through this process deciding finally to implement the same $1 million limit. The text is nearly identical as the city of Delafield used, but that $1 million limit is tied somehow, and I think Attorney Macy alluded to that Mount Horeb decision. So it's not an arbitrary number. It's a significant number, so I don't think that we'd be tied up, setting up referendum votes, all the time or something like that. It would come into play for significant projects like this. I mentioned before, $1 million, that's a third of our annual budget. And to have 3 votes approve that kind of spending, in my opinion, that should go back to the people. So for that reason, I would propose that we direct the village attorney, I'm going to make a motion to direct the village attorney to draft language, taking the example from the city of Delafield, perhaps using that as a template, to present that to the board so that we can take action on that. That's my motion.
I'm all in favor of doing this, of a referendum. I had the Sussex one in mind, I guess. I read that one, and I'm more inclined to use the Sussex template. It seems to be more in line with what our village is doing and things, and I think it'd be more, I'm not crazy about the Elm Grove one, because under the circumstances when we drew that up, it was under some kind of duress, I believe, with a construction project. So I've looked at them both, and I really am in favor of the Sussex plan, Mike, if you...
I would object to that, and I have a few reasons why. I've reviewed the Village of Sussex ordinance as well. I think Attorney Macy, he's laid that out for us too. But there are a couple of problems. First of all, the Village of Sussex ordinance is not binding. It simply makes a recommendation. It's similar to what Sandy Hamm presented at Citizens' Comments. It's essentially an advisory referendum, so it's not binding. And my goal in this, and I've heard the residents loudly on this, there have been a couple that have made their opinion known very clearly. They want some teeth to this. They want a voice in it. So I hear what you're saying. I have considered it, but to go a little bit further.
Mike, is that the only objection, is the binding part?
No, there are a couple others. First of all, the Village of Sussex ordinance requires at least 6 months to complete its work. One of the other trustees cited his concern that this whole binding referendum, this could really slow things down. And I think that's important to a point. We don't want to make hasty decisions with this amount of money, but to, arbitrarily say, well, we need at least 6 months to do that, I don't favor that. And finally, if if no recommendation is made, the board can proceed without a recommendation, according to the Village of Sussex ordinance. So it's not binding. If no recommendation is made, the board can just do what they want. And for those reasons, I would reject that, and I'd stand by my original motion to use the City of Delafield ordinance as a template. So I'd like to direct the village attorney to proceed with that, to prepare something that we can take action on.
How similar is the Delafield one to the Sussex one as far as numbers go and stuff?
So the Delafield ordinance is, I have it here.
Let me ask you the
Oh,
question.
sure, I'm sorry.
Finish the question here.
I'm sorry.
You said that there's, what were you talking about, the time frame and all that? Is the Delafield one have that too, or how
It does
different
not.
are they?
So,
I guess I didn't see that part of it.
So for those who aren't aware, I'm an insurance agent. I like thin contracts. I like short ordinances too. There's not a lot of wiggle room. So if we look at the Delafield ordinance, what have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences in the ordinance. Okay, and I think that addresses a concern that Trustee Kalinsky had with the agenda item ordinance. There's not a lot of wiggle room there, so I like that. It's got teeth. It follows the Mount Horeb decision. It very closely mirrors what Village of Elm Grove just adopted. If we look at the Sussex ordinance, we've got a couple of pages here. And this is, frankly, it's printed in smaller font than the Delafield ordinance. So, I cited some problems with the Village of Sussex ordinance. My motion was to proceed with the City of Delafield ordinance. So that's my motion. I'm going to stand by that.
Okay, do we have a second to that one? No second?
I'll second it.
It's been seconded. All those in favor of directing our village attorney to write a referendum mirroring Delafield's referendum? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. It passes. Moving on to D. Discussion and possible action regarding requiring solicitation of 3 competing bids on all spending of $25,000 or more for a single item, $35,000 in aggregate on a single project. Mike, this is yours also?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want to beat this into the ground. Frankly, I think this is common sense. We've heard plenty of residents speak in favor of this. I don't recall any residents speaking against it. I think we'd be hard pressed to make a case when we're spending upwards of $25,000 of our neighbors' money not to get 3 bids, at least to ask for those bids. Of course, we can't require that contractors provide us with a bid that they don't want any part of, but at least we should create specs, send it out to bid, collect the bids within a reasonable amount of time, consider them as a board, and take action. So I would make a motion to direct the clerk, to direct the village attorney to create an ordinance which requires the solicitation of at least 3 bids according to specifications approved by the board before any spending of $25,000 or more occurs.
Pardon?
The motion's fine. And I will,
We already have one in place, don't we, Mr. Macy?
I don't know.
There's
a state law in place, but state law doesn't apply to equipment.
Bingo.
But I just want to make sure we understand what the intent of this is. Someone's going to have to write specs that are unbiased and totally, that everybody can bid on. Then we have to bid it out. That's a publication and 2 weeks' notice, usually 2 printings in the paper. And I just want to make sure I understand the intent of this. For any, I don't know if it's a piece of equipment, if it's a service, if it's a public construction project. The law currently only applies to public service contracts, so I need a little more, I mean, I can write it and you can tell me whether those things are in there and I can deal with them, but I don't know exactly.
What about when we go on and along with the state?
That's what I was gonna ask.
The state, when they bid for their trucks and whatnot.
Well, let's go there, okay, let's discuss that.
I believe if you go on a state bid, you're not, I mean, it's not ethical to go ask for 3 other bids, because the state already did the work.
Correct.
They've got your lowest bid already, and if it's something identical to what you need, there's gotta be some kind of an adjustment in there that we can use the state bid. I'm not against the $25,000 or $30,000 cap, but keep in mind, if you want to use a state bid, you have to
Well,
leave an opening in there.
as Tom mentioned, we have a state statute already that does the same thing. And we have always pretty much abided by getting 3 bids on everything. I don't know why anybody wouldn't do that. The thing is, if you bind this tight, then if we find a private business that didn't submit a bid, and we can buy this item cheaper by sidestepping the 3 bids, I just don't like the idea of tying our hands to that system.
I guess
I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to buy something when we find a good deal on something that we know is gonna be cheaper than anybody else that happens to be in a certain situation. I just think we're tying our hands when we make an ordinance like this to bind our hands. We've been doing this kind of thing as long as I can remember on this board. People have always gone out looking for bids. It's just a prudent thing to do. But I just don't like the idea of tying our hands and saying that we have to do this. I remember Rod Stillwell, the last pickup truck that the DPW had was a used GMC pickup that Rod picked up for very reasonable. That truck lasted us 15 years, I believe, before we bought the last one that Jerry has now. And that was not on a bid. That was a private sale, only because it was a good deal and Rod jumped on it. Didn't have to bid. We didn't buy a new truck. So there's ways out there sometimes when a good deal comes along that it's beneficial to the village and it's beneficial to taxpayers. And I think that's what the goal here is to get decent prices on stuff and to tie our hands to say we have to go through the process, as Stu said, of getting 3 bids. And John mentioned, posting it for 2 weeks. And by that time, the good deal is gone. And we just cost ourselves maybe another $20,000 on a truck.
And if we do look for a used truck, how do we get 3 bids if it's one used truck?
The problem I see, the comment was made by the president that, if it's a good deal or a good price or so on, how are we to know that unless we get multiple bids? So it's impossible. How can you say that something is a good deal if we haven't asked? And I believe the clerk included a legal opinion, and again, this is an opinion, this is by the Towns Association Legal Counsel, according to Wisconsin Statute 60.47. Last sentence of the first paragraph says, notably, service contracts and equipment purchases, including vehicles, are not required to be bid out under this definition, under state statute. That's the problem. So he goes on to explain why it's reasonable and how to do that and what happens in the event of an emergency and so on, because those situations do come up. We had a plow truck situation in the middle of winter, right? So to your point, I believe if the board designates that, look, this is an emergency, the roof on the village hall caves in, okay, you pick the emergency, there can be an escape clause built in there. You just want to be really careful with that.
I guess the question, like I said, also, I believe we've bought a used ambulance before, we've bought used plow trucks before. How are we going to accomplish getting a bid on a used piece of equipment?
That's a good question. I guess, first of all, we need to spec out what it is we're buying. I believe we'd have some latitude with how to spec that out. If it's an ambulance, we talked about the class of the chassis, I believe it was, with the plow truck. We talked about the braking systems, things like this. So we could at least loosely define what it is we're looking for. And to my point, at least solicit the bid, at least go look for it. Instead of just saying, yep, this is a good deal, let's buy it. I don't think that comes across very well to our residents. In fact, I heard that loudly and clearly when I was canvassing, in April of 2021. The residents are not happy, many of them are not happy with the way that money's spent. And to my earlier point, I believe it makes sense when we're writing a check like this, and again, this would be for service contracts and equipment purchases. Okay, that's the gap. So I believe we should direct the village attorney to draft a law that would satisfy his objection that he raised earlier, give us some latitude to at least ask for the bid.
No, I said just the opposite. Somebody has to define, write specific specs. You can't be arbitrary and capricious and have people not know what you're bidding on.
Right.
You can't loosely define specs if you're going to follow the bid process. There's a law in the state of Wisconsin that requires when you have to follow the bid process, but there's also been court cases that say if you decide to use the bid process, then you have to follow it. And then you probably means you have to take the low bid.
To be fair, I think we said things differently. I don't want to get into the situation where the specs are so tight that we have to measure the tread depth on the tires or the wear on the paint or things like this. So I'm not trying to pin it down so tightly that nothing can get done.
I agree with you, but I agree 100%, because there's 3 pieces of equipment before my time on this board that got bought that we should have never purchased. And we had to get rid of one of them because it was unusable. But that's the other point.
So
who's gonna do the specs on any of these in the state?
Let me give you a practical example. You just bought a copier, I believe. How, I want someone to, I have to write this, so tell me how I'm supposed to write the procedure to buy a copier. So the clerk brings in the request to buy a copier. She then brings in and I'm gonna be overly specific, she brings in a request that she's gonna have so-and-so it can't be a copy company that writes the specs because it'll be biased, so she has to find someone to write the specs for the copier. And she probably needs your permission to hire that person to put the specs together. And then she comes back with the specs and you approve the specs and then we bid out the specs and then we take the low bidder on the specs. Is that what's envisioned?
No, from my standpoint, it's not. I won't support this. I think we already have rules there, and I think we've been following them specifically before, so I won't support that. I don't know what you guys want to...
Well, I guess we don't have rules to support it. There's nothing in the village ordinance, or there's nothing in the state statute regarding, the legal opinion is very clear on this. So, notably, service contracts and equipment purchases, including vehicles, are not required to be bid out under this definition of the state statute. We don't have a village statute that addresses this. That's my point. That's why I'm raising it. So to answer Attorney Macy's question, I think for an existing item, a good starting place, a spec would be the existing product. So if the clerk says we need to replace a copier, just like what happened, frankly, I think she did a great job soliciting bids on that.
But it wouldn't meet the ordinance for what you said, because she didn't bid it out.
Okay, but
She requested proposals.
A piece of equipment that was 10 years old, your specs are completely different 10 years ago.
That's true. They may be, so we might need to adjust them. But we can work with the clerk to create the specs in order to do that, for what to look at. And I think if we submit the request for proposal, okay, perhaps different than a bid, right? If we have vendors come back and they're throwing flags on the play and saying, look, you need to be a little more clear about this, or to your point, Trustee German, hey, that product's no longer available, we discontinued it 9 years ago, then we can adjust the specs. But one way or the other, we ought to take service contracts and equipment purchases of $25,000 or more. We ought to solicit multiple proposals, bids for that. That's my goal.
Are you talking bids or proposals? There's a difference.
Would you clarify, please?
Because you need a specific spec if you're gonna send it out for bids. And it's gotta be apples to apples. Unless somebody puts in a addendum that says they'll put this in instead of that. And that's what you're gonna vote on. But if it's a proposal, you don't have to, you're gonna get some numbers and you're gonna know where you stand, but it's not a bid.
I think that's a great point. So there's some things like the ambulance that we purchased recently that are very carefully spec'd, to your point, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we might need to do in those cases, frankly, is send it out to proposal, see what comes back, and maybe the Attorney Macy, this is what you were mentioning, tighten up our specs, decide, clarify, send it back, and then get the bids on our final request.
It's kind of a double-edged sword there, because if you send them out for proposals and you get numbers back, now you come back and you want to send it out for bids. Everybody knows what everybody's giving you for numbers, because it's public record. So now you send it out for bids, it's gonna be a bidding war.
So now the lowest guy can up his price 5,000 because the other two are 50,000.
Exactly.
10,000.
Exactly.
I agree.
We had a trustee here, well, that was a board member here at one time, and we were looking for a vehicle, and we took a state bid, or we got the state bid, and it was voted down. And in turn, he went around to a different truck dealer and told him, "Wait, we can get it for this. What can you do for us?" To me, that's a little bit of an oxymoron.
I agree.
And that's what you're gonna end up with if you go with proposals and bids.
I think this goes back to the same situation that we had with the proposed agenda, ordinance change. Every law is imperfect. So I think we need to accept that reality. We can't be paralyzed by the search for perfection so that we take no action, because then we run into problems there. And the harm that I see in the current system is residents have voiced this very loudly. We have emails, I've received lots of testimony from people saying, "Mike, are you kidding me? The board isn't doing that already?" We heard somebody tonight say that. It's common sense, when we're doing this. So I would make a motion.
There's a motion on the table.
No, I apologize, it was quite a while ago.
Actually, I just want to say one more thing.
Sure.
And back to what David was saying, there was an ambulance purchased about 3 years ago, or not 3 years ago, I'm sorry, 3 presidents ago. That was not, you talked to the fire chief, talked to myself, nobody went and looked at it, it was on auction. And that president went and bought it. Sight unseen, nobody went and looked at it. And I'll tell you right now, he paid way too much for it. Paid over $40,000 too much for it. And none of the board members had anything to say about it, and none of the people had anything to say about it. Nobody barked then.
So I wasn't serving on the board, so I can't speak to that. I believe my proposed ordinance change would help to eliminate things like that. So I'd stop there.
Does anybody know how many items this entails? Is this 50 items, 100 items, 2,000 items? How many things, pieces of equipment every year do you buy that, we could look for the DPW or for anything? I just want to know if anybody has thought through the ramifications of.
I'd say one truck probably every 5 years at the, minimum.
We could look
Let me
at the
just tell
capital
you,
plan.
every one of your contracts for your services will not have to be bid out. Your planner, your engineer, myself, and your accountant, all of those will have to be bid out every year.
Yep.
And if that's what you want to do and you want to take the low bidder, that's your choice. We probably will not be submitting. We don't play that game.
That's what I was saying.
I just want you to know, when you tax services on there, I want to make sure that we'll probably have to bid out police service. Police service is more than 25,000. We'll have to go to the city of Waukesha. We'll have to get 3 proposals under this ordinance for police service.
So,
seriously, that's literally that's what you've told me to write. And I want to make sure you understand, when you include services and all equipment, I don't know whether the fire department ever buys things that are more than $25,000. An engine or a repair.
They are.
And where does low bid get you sometimes, John?
Pardon?
Where does low bid get you sometimes?
Well, I just want to, the other thing is, I'm going to say this. I would like if Mr. Gurecki has found any community that has one that I can use, because we have 60 communities and I don't know of a single one that has this. But I will write whatever you tell me to write. That's fine, but I just don't know that I have a model that I can base it on.
So I'm kind of surprised that we find ourselves in the position of directing an attorney. He's at a loss for words.
I'll write it. I'm just saying, does everybody understand the ramifications when you put service, equipment, and public construction all under this ordinance?
I think one possible solution might be to request longer contracts from the service providers, right? That's one possible, instead of a year-by-year thing.
I don't know, I'm not sure you have contracts with any of your service providers.
Okay.
I can't speak for the engineer and the planner. We serve at the will of the board.
Right.
If 3 people on this board no longer want our firm to represent the board as their legal counsel, we will resign or we'll be fired. We don't believe in contracts. We believe we serve at the pleasure of the board. So I don't think I would ever recommend you enter into a 5-year contract with the engineer or the lawyer or the planner.
Yeah, if any of them are, not doing their job, we can't fire them because we have a contract. And if we do that, we'll be liable for buying them out.
Well, we do have an annual contract then with the engineer and planner.
Well,
Right.
we don't have
But
no
not-
contract. It's serviced by the pleasure of the board. That's what John just said.
Mine is.
Well,
I don't know that they have a
his is,
contract. I've never reviewed a contract.
Yeah, so when,
I don't remember
frankly,
a contract either with them.
under President Durr, we had to review that and then approve the renewal of the agreement with the planner. So I do recall that. But again, to my point, there's nothing perfect. Obviously, this is floated out for discussion and direction. But again, I believe that this type of spending, we should at least be soliciting proposals.
The motion on the floor, correct?
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second? Hearing none, it dies. Moving on to accounts payable. Christie, okay, the amount is $304,030.53.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $304,030.53.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion to approve the bills in the amount of $304,030.53. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Need a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I'll second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.